for bad. And what drew me to that was noticing the fact that it said that 300 women had been killed there, yet there wasn't so much as a plaque on the wall. And one day I was storming about Princes Street Gardens, possibly in a bit of a mood, and I was looking at the statues that were there, and again noticing that as there weren't any positive statues of women, and I had just read the book by Sarah Sheridan, and Sarah's obviously coming to speak to us shortly, Where Are the Women? And her book reimagines Scotland. Sarah will no doubt be saying stuff about that, so I don't want to talk about it, but putting together what I was seeing, there was a total lack of female visibility. I thought, not only is there a statue of a bear here in Princes Street Garden, a full-size statue of a bear and a dog, but there are no statues of named women who have done great things. And not only are there no named statues of women that have done great things, there's also no national monument, and it's in particular a national monument I think is appropriate for the women who were killed as witches. And the reason why I think a national monument is important is because it was a national disgrace. It was the fault of the Scottish state. Of course, it was influenced by religious leaders, etc. And that is where everything really came together when I was standing in Princes Street Gardens that day and thought, these women need to have a miscarriage of justice righted. They need to have an acknowledgement of their history, and they need a national monument. And it was at that point that I decided that I would start Witches of Scotland.
Okay, and what will the campaign look like as things go on? Because obviously there's some very kind of specific legal things that have to happen. So what happens next?
Well, in cases involving miscarriages of justice, we deal with people that are still alive, or if they are not alive, then their family is still alive. There is still a connection. The legal test is someone having a, inverted commas, legitimate interest, close inverted commas, to take a case. I have tested this out in a court of law, what the phrase legitimate interest means and who that is. And sadly, even though we feel that we have an interest in these women, it wouldn't be enough to satisfy a court of a legitimate interest. So the way that I am going to do that is to go down the route of a legal pardon. That's what I'm looking at, and that's what I'm working on at the moment.
Okay, and there needs to be a groundswell of support, doesn't there, for that to happen? Because I mean, pressure from politicians and so on.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what has to really happen is we keep having to spread the word, as we are with a great event such as this that's been put on today, just so that when people hear that you want an apology for witches and you want effectively for legislation to be passed, which means that these women are no longer witches and become once again women of Scotland, not witches, because at the moment they are legally witches in the sense that they have been convicted under the Witchcraft Act, and that is how history records them. And what I want to do is to make that go back. But yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, and a groundswell of public support and interest is what is really, really important, because when we speak to our politicians about it, as we already have, we want them to know that this isn't a joke. And I'm absolutely delighted to see that everyone that I've spoke to has taken it seriously so far.
Mm-hmm. I've been quite interested in that, because when the campaign first kicked off, there was press coverage, obviously, and we use Twitter quite a lot for the purposes of sharing the information about the podcast. And as we all know, Twitter is often can be quite a difficult place, shall we say?
Yes.
There wasn't a huge amount of horrifying.
No, I don't know about you, Zoe, but
I mean, the odd person.
Yeah. Sorry.
What were you going to say?
No, I was saying that. No, I don't know about you, but I was surprised that there wasn't more kickback.
Yeah, I think there was some initially where there were a few comments. It has to be said, it was generally from men, which I think is quite interesting because it's quite a gendered issue, this. But there were some people that said, well, what's the point of a pardon? They're long dead. I can't really get my head around it. Now, I'm a teacher, my day job, during the week. And I've got some of the young people that I work with who are listening to the podcast. No, I've not encouraged them. They've just gone and done it themselves. But one young person in particular said to me, well, what is the point of this? You know, they're dead. Like, why would you bother doing that? They can't get the apology. So maybe you could explain that for anybody that's got any kind of lingering doubts about it.
Okay, well, first of all, I think it's obviously a valid question, because people say, you know, shouldn't we be concerned with what's happening now? Isn't there enough to be getting on with now? And the answer to that is yes, there no doubt is enough to be getting on with now, and there no doubt are enough issues that we should be addressing. But this is another issue that I think we still do have to address. And the reason for that is that a miscarriage of justice not done to these people in the most serious way is always a miscarriage of justice. Justice is timeless. And the effect of this miscarriage of justice means that there are a whole parts of society of Scotland that have lost out women and history and people who never were, because these women were killed, that they didn't have children, that lineage just stopped as a result of these women. So an effect is felt today in a very practical sense, in that those people who were part of our society, their lineage ended at that time in a terrible miscarriage of justice. So first of all, my answer, I suppose, is it doesn't really matter to me if a miscarriage of justice was a week ago, a month ago, or 100 years ago, or 400 years ago. I still think it's important that they are addressed. The other thing, as Sheila touched on in her opening remarks, was that the women, themselves at that time, who were tortured and suffered this miscarriage of justice, witchcraft was used as a tool against them. It was a tool of persecution that was used. And in the world today, there still are countries where that is being used. Since we started the podcast, we have had contact from various people, one of whom is actually going to come and speak to us about witchcraft as it's still used abroad as a tool of persecution, mostly again against women and children. And we hope to have a lawyer from Tanzania come to speak to us about that soon. So the other thing is, from a practical point of view, is not only was it a terrible miscarriage of justice then, but it hasn't been addressed, and it's still happening to people around the world now. So I think it would send out a really, really positive signal from Scotland to say we acknowledge what happened to these women, we apologise for what happened to these women, and we want to send out a strong signal that using witchcraft as a tool of persecution is wrong, so that is a statement made by Scotland to other countries.
And who is it that would be issuing the apology? Is it the Scottish Parliament that would be expected?
Yeah, that would be what would be required in this case. The state, I suppose, is who was involved in the persecution of these women. It wasn't just the state; it was also the church. And I was interested to hear that Sheila is asking for, Remembering the Accused Witches of Scotland is asking for an apology from the church. I have not asked for an apology for the church. My apology isn't focused in relation to the church. I don't think it's the church's apology to give in the same way as the state can give an apology. Of course, I would be absolutely delighted if the church gave an apology. But my apology is a technical one, because there are a lot of women and men who were not caught by a pardon. So we can pardon the people that were convicted under the Witchcraft Act, but there were so many of them who were tortured, whose lives were ruined, and who were shunned from society as a result of being called witches, who never made it to trial. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they never made it to trial means that they can't be pardoned as witches. So the apology for me is not about an apology from the church, but is an apology again from the Scottish Parliament. For example, a good example, Councillor Kate Stewart's interest in Lilias Adey, which we of course all share her interest. She was a woman who never made it to have a trial. She wasn't convicted as a witch. She stood trial. Sorry, she didn't stand trial. She was accused as a witch. She was tortured and convicted as a witch, but never actually went to trial. Therefore, a pardon wouldn't legally change her status. And that's why I'm asking for an apology.
I think also one of the things that we've discussed is the purpose of an apology too, and of the campaign generally and broadly, is that we've talked about parallels between then the initial sort of witch trials and now, in the way that women don't necessarily have equality. And Twitter is actually a really good example of that. You know, the amount of misogynistic attacks and so on that happen on Twitter. That one of the things that the two of us have really talked about and noticed is still the use of the word witch. And that's used almost always as a pejorative way of shutting people down. And also sort of the co-opting of the term witch hunt from people to use, if they're getting heat. And it's often been used by male politicians saying that they're, the focus of a witch hunt, when really what it is that people are trying to hold them accountable. So as a writer, what I'm interested in particularly is the language around it and what we do with that language, that we really rethink it. For example, on the podcast, this week's episode 7, we've interviewed a Scottish writer called Alice Tarbuk, who's a witch. And we asked her to come on because her new book is about a year in the life of a witch, and also as an academic, she's looking back at the history of witches too. And she was very interesting to talk to about how witch is thought of now. Now there's a growing group of people that understand that it's a life choice like any other, and should be receiving the same amount of respect as any other religious choice. But that also some people just cannot see it in that way and still see it very much in this horrible, stigmatized, stereotyping, black-hatted sort of nonsense way of looking at things. So we're really interested in kind of unpicking some of those modern thoughts about what witches are too, alongside. Even though really it's kind of a thorny issue, because during the witchcraft trials, these women probably weren't witches. Yeah. So it's bizarre. Yeah, it's just a bizarre thing altogether. Somebody has asked where they can get a hold of the podcasts, where they can access them, Claire. So do you want to answer that?
Yeah, you can find us on our podcast, our
website.
Website, yes, thank you. Thank you, sorry. Which is www.witchesofscotland.com. So quite easy to remember. You can access the podcast there. If you're on Twitter, that shows your Twitter and Insta links as well. But if you're on Twitter, you can find us. If you just type in Witches of Scotland, you'll be able to find us on Instagram as well. But you can get those through the website.
And you can get the podcast as well from Spotify and from Apple iTunes, and I think various other locations. But if you just search it on Google, you'll be able to find it from there.
Yeah, and the Witches of Scotland website also allows you to sign up, so that when we are starting to put into action the legal challenge, you'll be able to see us doing that and how we're going to do it. So if you sign up, we'll be able to keep you updated.
Okay, that's really useful.
That's really great. That's a really good summary of all the things that you're doing, and we're really looking forward to you letting us know when you want us to sign petitions, come and do demonstrations, all of that kind of thing. I'd quite like to say that the Remembering the Accused Witches of Scotland, our main focus is getting a monument to start off with. That is what we're focusing on for the next 5, 6 until it happens. So this is a parallel party organisation, and we're really going to support you all the way that we can. But our focus is going to be on getting a monument in.
Well, we're delighted as well. I mean, we loved coming down to the the event that we already had. It'll a never be forgotten event, given at the time that it was, what was going on in society, you know, that all these people turned out to hear about these women. It was incredibly touching, and I really, really hope that one day we'll be standing next to at least one, if not a number of monuments to these women.
Yeah,
so
it's the case that anybody that comes to Scotland sees this and knows this is a part of our history and understands that we can see that it was a wrong that needs to be addressed. So I think it's the monument's so important.
Now, as Sarah said, the monument is our main focus, but also the extending the accused witches trail is also quite important, because although the monument will name all of the accused, the little discs will actually tell their stories as well, and that's just as important as you said, because there's such a lot of reflections between society now and then, and the way they treat women hasn't changed in 400 years.
Absolutely.
It's really, really good. We're going to open up to everybody to come online now and ask questions if they want to. We've got several questions and a lot of comments going on.
We're going to get Claire and there you are.
We're going to get everybody online.
Yay!
So if you'd like to switch on your videos and your speakers now, that would be great. I'm just going to moderate a few bits and pieces, because we have had questions about the pardon and also about the memorialisation, and some statements about what people have done. Is everybody able to see? Yeah, you got a whole set of people. Okay, so could I ask KMC Gilead to ask her question? His question, her question, their question.
Hiya, she first, fine, thank you. So I've like always kind of been interested in this, and I've seen your campaigns and been watching the podcast as well, and really wanting to get involved. I work in Parliament now for an MSP in our office, and I was chatting to her about it a bit, and she's quite interested in it too. And I know that a lot of this kind of will have to go through Parliament. So I was just wondering what kind of connections you've made and what it is both kind of groups are looking to do, and if I can help out in that before March, before Parliament dissolves, in any way to kind of put some foundations in what it is you would like to do.
Sarah, Sheila, do you want to go first?
Yeah. You've already gotten in touch with myself, and we've already exchanged emails.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be sending you all the stuff, because hopefully I've co-opted her onto our committee so she can get involved and help in all the research and everything that we're doing, which is brilliant. But yeah, the memorial, I mean, we have to become a charity first to be able to raise the money to build the memorial and maintain the memorial. But also we need to find out if we know all the names yet. I mean, the Orkney Witch Memorial, when they were doing that, they found another 8. So, I mean, there are ladies and some men out there that were accused that we still don't know about. So there's a lot of work to be done about understanding this and explaining it more to the general public. And it should be something that's taught in schools. Our history should be taught in schools. And just to follow on from what Sarah said, I do some stuff at the Parliament, and to my knowledge, there's only one room that's named after a woman, and that's the Mary Somerville room. I mean, they're all named, but they're named for men, apart from Mary Somerville. And I know for a fact there's been more than one important woman in Scottish history.
Definitely.
Okay.
I can talk to that actually a little bit as well. There is a whole wall at the Parliament which has a very beautiful a ceramic installation of women talking about women. And you can go in and have a look at that. But I agree with you, it's crazy that they didn't gender balance that when they were building the Parliament. And actually it shows how far we've come since the days that they were planning that, because I don't think that would happen today. I think there is a much more heightened awareness. I think that would be different. Which is good, you know. I think we are moving.
Absolutely. There's also hidden women as well, because we've got a library which is called the Duncan Institute, but they've left off the first name of the person who bequeathed that library, which is Elizabeth Duncan. So there's quite a few hidden places that are actually named after women, but because they're not given their full name, it's not showing. Could I ask Irene to ask her question now, please? Irene Halliburton, are you there?
Wait a minute, I need to unmute myself. What was my question? So
Is there work in progress to identify?
Yeah. So I've done some research recently just on the accusations in Perthshire, and I know from the database that exists, there were 112 records on it, and even without being able to access Kirk session records and things in this, just because of restrictions at the moment, I've now got that up to 125. So I think there is quite a lot that we will need to discover before we can produce a monument that details all of the people who were accused. Or will it be something we can add to as time goes on? I haven't seen any plans for, this is fairly new to me. Sarah just told me about this in the past couple of weeks. So I don't know what the form of the monument is or anything like that, if we can add as time goes on.
Okay, let's go for it.
Yeah, well, to be honest, neither do we. But what we know is that we would like it to be big. Well, I've got to imagine it in my head. It's going to be as striking as the Kelpies, and then it's going to become, really quite a place that, a must visit kind of venue. But yeah, I mean, the more that one of the things that we're doing, not just all the boring constitutional stuff and the charity bit, is getting little subgroups together to do the research and build on the database. And we've already talked with Emma and Ewan, who you'll see later on today, with the wiki data and all that they've already started, with the survey of Scottish witchcraft and the map with all the names on it, to build on what's already there. So, I mean, this is not just a really small project for a couple of years. Yeah. This is probably going to go on for forever.
So I've used the Scottish witchcraft database in my work, but I've found errors in it, and I've found cases that have been misassigned, and so it would be really useful if they were on board as work progresses to find more accused, to actually updating that.
I mean, that's certainly something that the committee can look to is building stronger links with Julian Goodacre and his historic history students who did it in the first place.
Can I say hiya, guys? Just on that very point that Sheila makes about stronger ties, Julian was in contact with me and couldn't get a ticket, wanted to come. So he's going to be attending next week to join us.
Okay. Can I get a ticket for next week too then?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think we're going to sell out next week. That was our overflow.
Yeah,
it's so popular. We could do this every Sunday till Christmas, I think.
Could I also point out, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, Laura Graham is with us. She's looking straight at our camera. Laura, yeah. I hope you don't mind me. Would it be all right if I point out the work you've already done? Would you like to say a word about it?
I'd love to. Thanks very much. It's very kind of you. Yes, I'd really appreciate it. But it's a great compliment.
Okay. I'll just start by saying that Laura and I were put in contact by her sister, who's a colleague of mine, because she already has done work on memorialising Scottish witches, and it's such a powerful piece of work already, which you can see some of it online. So I was wondering maybe if she might be allowed, if that would be okay, to tell us about that so people can go and see it.
Go for it. Yeah, great.
Sorry, Laura.
Thank you. Hold on, am I?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes. I didn't expect that. Thanks very much, Claire. I appreciate your point. My work was created 2009, 2010. It's called Soul Murder. And I was very moved at the time. I was actually living in Northern Ireland, and I looked at the Island Magee witches. The Island Magee witches were 6 women on a little part of Northern Ireland, which has very close links to Scotland. none of these women were actually murdered or killed. They were put in stocks, they were tried, it lasted a year, they went through horrific circumstances. The circumstances of being held in stocks, not being able to go, you know, when you think about it, not being able to go to the toilet, not being able to be fed, menstruating, all these things are all happening in front of everybody over a period of months, sitting in these stocks. But as an artist, I wanted to look more deeply into the background of the law, which is why Claire and I had the chat, thanks to Susan. I then realised when I looked at the Scottish situation that it was the criminal courts that convicted. They took it off the ecclesiastical authorities and they went into the court system. I then became interested in the fact that we've got a continuity with the criminal courts, and I asked 2 lawyers to do an installation for me. So I took the original indictment of Agnes Sampson, who was the first witch to be convicted. She was James I's first guinea pig. This woman was a very, very clever woman. She was really way out ahead of most people of her society. She could also read the tides, she could read things. I mean, she was really quite extraordinary. I took her indictment, it was about maybe 20, 25 statements long. Things like you drank wine, you consorted with a black dog, you sat on a boat, absurd statements. And I asked 2 advocates to read these out in a testament, a legal testament. And of course, Agnes was, technically it was called worrying. She was strangled and then she was burned. She was one of the, I think she might have been one of, she was burned on Castle Hill anyway. So I created a wrought iron structure that's human-sized, and I dressed her in linen and candle wax. Actually, I could almost cry at the moment because the experience of burning her at dawn overlooking the sea was one of the most horrific things I've ever done in my life. I honestly have to say it was chilling. Took me a long time to recover from it, but it is in a form of photographs and film, and the statement is there for people to read, the indictment, the ditty. At the time, it was brought to Edinburgh to be in the theatre, what's the theatre called at the back of the Traverse? Theatre Royal?
The Lyceum?
Not the Lyceum, the other one? The Royal Lyceum, no, it is that one. So there was a play being staged called The Last Witch by Rona Monroe. And of course that was the story of a woman and her child, because they were both put in a tub of tar and burned. And Janet, I actually called her Janet because nearly everybody, many people who were burned as witches were called Janet. I think it's a term for a wise woman. So don't call your daughters Janet. But in any case, she stood in the Royal Lyceum and the film was in the breast area, so you could watch it. And the weird thing about the filming of it was it almost looked like a human being's spirit was coming out. You can see it in the film. And it was there for the whole of the Edinburgh Festival that year. But Julian Goodacre was part of a group of people. There was a great conference due to the Fringe. I think they brought people to speak. And at the time, he mentioned, I think it was Julian, I don't want to speak out of turn, but he had taken the question to the Scottish Parliament that there should be an exoneration, and they discounted it. So I think what Claire's doing, what you're all doing, is timely and amazing, actually. But anyway.
Oh no, sorry. Thank you so much, Laura. I followed up on the person who was looking for an exoneration, and unfortunately, he was the right research hadn't been done, because he was looking for an exoneration of the Last Witch, not the Last Witch in Scotland, but the last witch to be convicted down in England under the Witchcraft Act, who was convicted of the pretended witchcraft, because she was holding seances and stuff like that, and that's not what we're about at all. So as we all know, so that's why it didn't get anywhere, because it was the wrong place and the wrong person to do that with. But yes, so that was to the extent that Julian had been involved before. But thanks so much, Laura. Sorry, but I thought you'd like to hear Laura's work because it's so fascinating. Sorry if there's other questions. Thanks.
It is fascinating, and we're hampered by time because we have got so many other contributions to come in. I was just going to suggest that if people have work that they have done in the past and they want it to be shown to the group, I've got all of the Eventbrite addresses, so I can send out emails with links to places. So that will be happening after the events.
Sorry, is it? Could I just quickly add on to the question asked earlier, if it's possible to maybe even just get Claire's email address, and I could maybe contact you about that and what your process is with Parliament about the pardon and the exoneration, because I would like to help in any way I can with putting you with the right people. If you want to just send me over your details or something, and then I can contact you about that, and then the questions for Chris can keep going.
Absolutely. Can I also apologise? Zoe's not here and I'm having problems with my lighting, as you can see, which is why it looks so sinister. We've had a power cut here in Tarbuk, so Zoe disappeared completely. We're hoping we're not putting it down to any supernatural factor. Completely, and yeah, I'm having a bit of just enough battery to survive, so sorry about that, just in case you're wondering where Zoe had gone. And I'm absolutely delighted to do that with you. Yeah, we're so I'm sure Sarah can hook us up.
Yes, definitely, we can do that. That's not a problem. And that goes for everybody. You know, I can't share everybody's email, obviously, but I can put people in touch with each other if people are willing to have emails from participants in this group. Okay, so talking about memorialisation, thank you very much, Claire and Zoe. That was fascinating, and we're going to have a conversation bit in after Sarah has done her bit. If Sarah would like to come on the screen, that would be fantastic. Are you there, Sarah? Hello.
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 I'm trying to start my video. I'm coming.
Now, do you want me to start the video, or do you want to do it live?
I'm happy to do it live, actually. Should
Let's
we go live? Yeah,
Let's do it live.
I recorded a video, and then just for everyone that's watching, I'd totally forgotten I'd recorded a video because it was a little while ago. And I'm like, what did I say on that video? So it's so lovely to see everyone here today. And I suppose the thing that I was asked to talk to is why we would memorialise the witches. In fact, why would you want to memorialise all women? And Claire's already talked about that feeling of just suddenly realising that you know, there aren't enough statues and plaques and all the ways that we memorialise people, street names and installations and name days and building dedications and all the different ways we do it. And coming from Edinburgh, I think we're particularly bad at this in Edinburgh. One thing that Claire didn't say there is we actually have more statues of animals in Edinburgh, named animals, than we have named women. And I suppose as well, more recently, this has really come up because of the Black Lives Matter movement and what's been going on within that movement around memorialisation, the way people have been more memorialised, and auditing that largely Georgian and Victorian sort of set of decisions to put up a whole load of statues, mostly to white, male, heterosexual, middle-class guys who were colonists in one way or another. So for me, memorialisation has three important functions. The first one is that it helps us to understand where we come from, because it is the history, not only the history that we choose to remember, but it is the history that we choose to honour. And that is the second reason why memorialisation is important, and getting it right is important, because it is about who you choose to honour. And you can see on the wall behind me here, there are hundreds and hundreds of books. Most of them are history books. Some of them are really weird history books. You know, you can look at the history of salt, or the history of fishing, or the history of brothels in Edinburgh. I've got a great one over there on that. And you know, you have these kind of very specialized books that can tell the history. But if you're deciding to name a street or a statue or a plaque to somebody, what you're saying is, this is something that we admire. This is something that we want to remember. This is something that is important we remember for whatever reason. And that's the third reason why memorialization is important, because it shows us where we come from. It helps us to understand what we know about ourselves. And it also tells us a lot about where we want to go, how we want to change, or what we want to aspire to. And, you know, it's Remembrance Sunday today, and Remembrance Sunday is a memorial to mostly male victimhood. You know, these are men who were sent out to do something by the state, and often poorly, you know, often on poor decisions, and we memorialise those men very well. And particularly if we're looking at World War I, we don't, for example, memorialise the women that went out with the Scottish Women's Hospital. So this is something generally in our society, we're just really bad at memorialising women. Claire very kindly mentioned the book that I wrote, which is called Where Are the Women, which remapped the whole of Scotland according to women's history. And it's an imagined guidebook, although it does include some memorials that are there, because we do have a few, but it is really very few. Just to give you some sense of even UK-wide how bad the problem is, Bethany Hughes, who is a historian that I'm sure you're familiar with from television, who specialises actually in ancient history, undertook a study for Historic England, which is Historic Environment Scotland and England, in 2016, just about the time actually just before I was writing the book. And what Bethany discovered was only about 0.5% of historical material in archives, in artifact stores, really anywhere that you can get your hands on it, is female. So the historical material that we have is male. And it's not only a fact that we don't have enough statues or street names, we also haven't kept and preserved letters and documents and photographs that include women. Having said that, UK-wide, 15% of statues are to named female figures, of named statues. However, way and ahead, the majority of them, I think over about 10%, are Queen Victoria, because Queen Victoria loved a statue, and she loved being memorialised. It was a great way for people to suck up to her. The second most memorialised woman over the whole of the UK is Wendy from Peter Pan. She's a fictional woman, fictional female figure. So I think this is very, very interesting. When I started to write Where Are the Women, I already knew we had a problem. That's why I pitched the book and wanted to write the book. But it made me very angry, because I began to realise how big our problem was, how badly this had been done. And my main research resource, I live in Edinburgh, is the National Library. And between my home and the National Library, which I walk, not every day at the moment, but in normal circumstances, I walk that walk very often. I have to go along George Street. And on George Street in Edinburgh, there are the statues from Charlotte Square to St Andrew Square, 6 men, 6 white, heterosexual, middle-aged, colonial kind of men. And as I was making that walk, as I was going along every day at the time I was writing the book, I was becoming angrier and angrier seeing this. And these statues, some of these statues have been up since the Georgian era. There's a statue of George III there, or sorry, George IV there. But some of them have gone up in the last 10 years. So right at the very end of George Street, there's a statue to James Clerk Maxwell, who's a brilliant scientist, definitely should be honoured, definitely should be memorialised. And at his feet is his dog Toby. He was very fond of his dog Toby. However, not included in the statue is Catherine Clerk Maxwell, his wife, who did all his calculations and without whom he would not have been able to do the very important and interesting work that he did. And for me, that just absolutely sums up. So people then say to me quite often when I'm talking about this issue, they say, why have we not memorialised the women? Is it just that there aren't enough women? Is it just that they haven't achieved enough? What is going on there? During the course of writing the book, I made up 1,200 memorials to women, and all of them, if they had been men, would probably have some kind of monument somewhere. So it's not that we don't have amazing women's history, we certainly do. I think it's really about a sort of patriarchal society that believes that, particularly in the Georgian and Victorian eras when most of these statues went up, that it's sort of inappropriate for women to show off, to be aware, you know, to be seen publicly. And a good example of that happening in somebody's life is the writer Susan Ferrier, a very famous Edinburgh writer who was a great favourite of Sir Walter Scott. She wrote her first novel, I think in 1819, and it came out anonymously. Everyone thought it was Sir Walter Scott who had written this novel, and she was unmasked And by the time she was writing her third novel, she retired. She just didn't want to be in the spotlight. She said she just couldn't bear it. And that continued right through. She's a late Georgian, right through into the Victorian era, where you get, for example, there's a famous quote from a councillor in Accrington who said he didn't want female council members because he didn't want them to have to endure the rough and tumble of political life. So you get this sense of, it's embarrassing for women. This isn't something that women should want for themselves, if you like. And that made me very angry, because I began to think about a kid growing up and being a kid growing up in Edinburgh, and that third point of how do we aspire to see ourselves? And I thought of me walking along one side as a girl of George Street, and perhaps my brother walking along the other side, and he would see 6 statues to himself, to people who were just like him. And I would see no statues, and what that of people who were like me. And so what that tells me is that my history isn't important. I don't have the same kind of bright prospects. I'm never going to be worthy of doing something that is statue worthy, if you like. And I think it's really important, for the sake of the younger generation, that we memorialize both positive women's history, both women's history that is about achievement, but also about suffering, about victimhood. And I often, when I'm talking about the witches in particular, I go back to thinking about my very first trip to Berlin. I come from a Jewish background. My father's Catholic, my mother's Jewish. And visiting Berlin was a big deal for me. I speak quite good German. There's a lot of Yiddish in the house when I was growing up. And so going to Berlin, which is like the axis of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, where it all kind of kicked off, was quite a big deal for me. And they memorialize it so well. They own their history. It's a city that has, very heavy history on its shoulder, but it knows itself, and it has apologized. It is aware. And I feel that is what a memorial for the witches will do for Scotland, and also for the wider world. And I suppose there's something else that comes to me because of my Jewish heritage. When you go to a funeral, Jewish funeral, people don't say, "I'm so sorry," or "greatest condolences," or anything like that. They say, "May this person's memory be a blessing." And what they mean by that is not only that memory being a blessing because they did good things, but also as a lesson. And we have still today, I think, as Claire and Zoe alluded to, a lot of lessons to learn from the witchcraft trials in Scotland, and that sense of memorializing something that is essentially a memorial to victimhood. We gain such a lot by putting injustices right, and we are in a position to lead the way, actually, and as Claire mentioned, say that this isn't okay, because this is still going on. It's still going on in actual witch trials, mostly in African countries. And so it is a way for Scotland to sort of lead the way in that kind of apology, that kind of pardon. But also, we are, in a sense, all witches. Zoe and Claire talk about, being quite surprised that there isn't more of a kickback, that there isn't more sort of more people coming forward and trying to victimize them for trying to memorialize these women. And I'm really glad about that. But I see every day online lots and lots of women who are raising their voices to talk about whatever it is they're talking about being jumped on, being silenced. And that can be about what they consider beautiful. Body acceptance is a huge issue. It can be about political issues. It can be about lots and lots of different things. And women's voices, as Professor Mary Beard has pointed out, she wrote a whole book about it, are probably the most controversial thing in this whole kind of scenario. The hearing of women's voices and the hearing of women's opinions is something that our society to this day is not good at. We are today celebrating, I suppose, Joe Biden's win in America. It's really exciting that has happened. And one of the best things that I saw online this morning was looking at a progression. There was a picture of Rosa Parks on the bus. It's a Black woman on the bus. In the early 20th century, they tried to throw her off the bus. And next you have that little schoolgirl, Ruby, walking into school, Black girl going to school. And it said, Rosa sat, excuse me, oh, well, sometimes when I talk too quickly. Rosa sat, Ruby walked, but Kamala Harris, who is the new Vice President of America, was able to run for president because of what they did. And I think in commemorating the witches, we will be commemorating women's voices, we'll be commemorating women's lives and commemorating women's suffering, actually. And that is a really important thing to do, and bears some examination by our current culture, our current society where we're living. And we can change the world by commemorating the past well. And that's all I've got to say.
And that is perfect timing. That was wonderful.
And what would you like me to talk about?
Just say what you've been doing recently, because you've published something, haven't you?
Oh, yes. Hold on. I'll get it. It's on the shelf.
Sarah, might I say that if you send that video to someone else who could share screen, they might be able to...
I'll have a go. I'll have a go at sending them all to Andrea.
No, what you, can you see that? Okay. The reason, I can see your project, the reason why it must be frustrating, because it was for us as well, that it's all taking a bit of time, and I can see that you are sort of like playing with your constitution and your charity status before you raise money. And we took a bit of what we thought was a bit of a shortcut with doing that. And we got adopted by the Orkney Heritage Society. And so we used all their status, and they just set up a separate project for it. And they were quite happy. They got kind of like, they didn't have to do a great deal of work, but they got a lot of the glory, and they reined us in with a few things to do with health and safety and a few checks. But they ran all the finances for us and everything like that. And when we'd finished, Raggy always wanted to publish, and the Orkney Heritage Society regularly release these called the new Antiquarian Journals. They regularly release them, and they released one which was volume 9 fairly recently, and it basically, on the day of the inauguration, we had a morning inauguration. And then in the afternoon we had academic lectures, and the people who gave academic lectures wrote a paper for our project, for the journal, and that's now on sale. It's an incredibly good read, actually. I think my favorite article is one by a young lady who's she's doing a PhD in creative writing. Her name's Ashley Angus, and she put out some really interesting strands. She had noticed that in the transcripts for the witch trials, that all you get is the answers that the witches gave. And there have been historians who are looking at trying to work out from the answers that were given, what were the standard questions that were being asked. So it's actually trying to take those transcripts and look at what the questions were that were being asked, because the questions are often full of assumptions, and they're leading questions. And Ashley is using that to write a novel about the Orkney witch trials. But she wrote an article for the Antiquarian Journal, which is absolutely fascinating. And the whole time that I've been working on this is I've been working on this from the point of view of social justice, and I'm more concerned, I've always been much more concerned with, rather than healing the past, about focusing on not repeating the past in the present. And somebody earlier on said, they pointed out the thing with COVID and basically being the Stasi, and we're all encouraged to rat on our neighbours if they're having parties. And that was exactly that same fear. There are so many parallels with COVID-19 and the accusations of witchcraft, because it's an invisible thing. Nobody knows who's got it. I don't think anyone's doing it anymore, but to begin with, there were people sneezing on police officers and saying, I've got it, I hope you've got it, and I hope you die. And it's kind of like, there are so many parallels with witchcraft and sort of like the contact with the devil. with today and then, it's fascinating. And so I really wanted to look at that idea of about how we treat everyone, and that was kind of like what I wanted to bring into our memorial, which is we deliberately made very minimalistic because we wanted to make it cheap, enduring, but we were really on a tight budget. And however, I've been really interested listening to the artist's film, because there is a sense at Galahad, and several people have said it, there's a sense there that the atmosphere has changed since what we did. And we could well be making that up psychologically. It could be wish fulfillment. But I like to think that we may have changed something. And I hope we have.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much, Helen, for doing that. I think
that was unprepared.
Yes.
Well done.
Oh, the film's not working. There's someone from Orkney. Ask them. Ta-da.
Thanks.
I celebrate your struggle. It's one of the problems we deal with, technological glitches. When I was at drama school, it was called the perversity of inanimate materials. So if you get 7 glasses, you'll have 6 of them on the stage for the whole run. If you only have 6, 2 of them will break on the first night. So I'm coming in at this from a different angle, because I'm not a historian. But that doesn't mean I don't have a lot of historical background. It's been of interest to me all my life. And one of the things that I'm very well aware of is that James VI first genuinely believed his mother was a witch, because he was taught that his mother was a witch by the Presbyterian lords that stole him from his mother from Stirling Castle. His mother was Mary Queen of Scots. So the religious war that was on then was enormous. And also the witches in Shakespeare's play were written for James, who studied the occult, and he used his perceptions to create the King James Bible. So when we're looking at whether or not in the 21st century we are affected by in any way what went on when people were accused of being witches, tried and murdered, we're still living in the 21st century in any churches that use the King James Bible with one of the fundamental background noises to the beliefs that people had about what it was possible for witches to do. And I'm coming at this from the place of knowing that it's still extremely hard in the 21st century for anyone to say out loud, hello, I am a witch. Because people don't know what you mean when they say that, because they're still busy dealing with green faces, Halloween and the Wicked Witch of the West. And I assure you, I'm very capable of playing the Wicked Witch of the West. However, it's also truly true that if you believe in magic, if you actually trust that your shamanic being can affect, in conjunction with nature, that which happens in the world, the last thing in the world you do is wish anyone ill, because it's one of the fundamental precepts of magic. The ill wishing comes back upon the wisher. And it might not be tomorrow it comes back, but when it comes back 100-fold. And whams you straight in the face when the last thing in the world you expect is to be whammed straight in the face. And I'm not saying that as something I pretend I believe. It's something I have researched in many different levels. I would like to read you this poem. I think it's a poem. It is written by a woman called Sherry Kennan, and she's addressing it to the people of Forres. where there were quite a few women killed as witches. So what Sherry Kennan says is, it was not witches who burned, it was women. I also acknowledge there were men, but mostly it was women who were seen as too beautiful, too outspoken, had too much water in the well, yes, seriously, who had a birthmark, women who were too skilled with herbal medicine, too loud, too quiet, too much red in her hair, women who had a strong nature connection, women who danced, women who sung, or anything else really. Sisters testified and turned on each other when their babies were held under ice. Children were tortured to confess their experiences with witches by being fake executed in ovens. Women were held underwater, and if they float, they were guilty and executed. If they sunk and drowned, they were innocent. Women were thrown off cliffs. Women were put in deep holes in the ground. The start of this madness was years of famine, war between religions, and lots of fear. The churches said that witches, demons, and the devil did exist, and women were nothing but trouble. As we see even today, there is often a scapegoat created. Everything connected to a woman became feared, especially her sexuality. It became labelled as dark and dangerous, and was the core of the witch trials throughout the world. Why do I write this? Because I think the usage of words are important, especially when we are doing the work to pull these murky, repressed and forgotten about stories to the surface. Because knowing our history is important when we are building the new world, when we are doing the healing work of our lineages, and as a redress, to give the women who were slaughtered a voice, to give them a chance of peace. It was not witches who burned, it was women, it was men, it was people. And I think that that's a really important layer of the recognition that we're trying to bring by having memorials, by speaking aloud about the injustice. But I also know someone, her name is Helen, and she was the clan mother of Clan Daliada living on Arran. And Clan Daliada used Druid practices. And Helen is a woman whose family is of the old religion historically. And when they were practicing by gathering together and being in circles in nature, the local Baptist minister was accusing them of devil worship 20 years ago. I have a friend called Frank Pilkington who is a psychic astrologer, and he is genuinely incredibly psychic. And when he was interviewed on television at one point, he was interviewed by someone who had also a Presbyterian minister on with him, who accused him of being a son of the devil. So what we're trying to do, I think, is change a mode of thinking which was ingrained in our psyches by this period in time when women and men were being accused of being witches, most of whom were not actually witches at all, but who were painted as black as the ace of spades. And I don't use that in the terms of people of colour, but the way in which we in the Western world contrast black with white. But if you're a white witch and you talk to the animals if you connect with nature, if you work with herbs, if you believe that distance healing is possible, if you have a hands-on Reiki master, if you do yoga, if you work with your own consciousness to disappear old myths and release your creative intelligence, if you are a creator of poetry or artwork or music and you are inspired, then you would definitely be a major candidate for burning. As a friend of mine says, they don't physically burn me now. They just burn into you with accusation. And this is a poem by someone called Hafiz. I know the way you can get when you have not had a drink of love. Your face hardens, your sweet muscles cramp. Children become concerned about a strange look that appears in your eyes, which even begins to worry your own mirror and nose. Squirrels and birds sense your sadness and call an important conference in a tall tree. They decide which secret code to chant to help your mind and soul. Even angels fear that brand of madness that arrays itself against the world and throws sharp stones and spears into the innocent and into oneself. Oh, I know the way you can get if you have not been drinking love. You might rip apart every sentence your friends and teachers say, looking for hidden clauses. You might weigh every word on a scale like a dead fish. You might pull out a ruler to measure from every angle in your darkness the beautiful dimensions of a heart you once trusted. I know the way you can get if you have not had a drink from love's hands. That is why all the great ones speak of the vital need to keep remembering God. And of course, as God, this could be goddess, it could be humanity's great heart, it could be green cheese. But you will come to know and see love as being so playful and wanting, just wanting to help. That is why Hafiz says, bring your cup near me, for all I care about is quenching your thirst to freedom. All a sane man can ever care about is giving love. And still, hundreds of years on, from these dreadful, hate-filled, unkind, unjust trials, we are still dealing in humanity with hate-filled, fear-based, unjust actions happening on our watch. And so a lot of the people that I know, the beings that we are releasing ourselves into the world after having hidden a long time. We hide because we are still in our DNA, afraid of being accused of being witches and hounded. A lot of the time, actually, the hounding is, as with Frank, to accuse him of being a charlatan, as they did with Helen Duncan, who was actually seeing young men who had drowned in submarines off the German coast in the Baltic Sea, and telling their mothers that their sons weren't coming back, which is why she was jailed by Winston Churchill and his team, who had also requested the Wiccan circles of Britain to protect the coastline. So what we're asking for is a depth of awareness and honesty, a connection with nature and with love. And that in that love, we remember the thousands of beings who were sacrificed to a belief in patriarchy, paid doctors, and jealous, envious, fear-based criticism. So it's my suspicion that doing without jealous, envious, fear-based criticism is a good thing. And that our developing our capacity to see beyond the collective trauma in which we are all held is quite important. And collective trauma is something that Thomas Hubbell's been working on all over the world, where what's happening is that one is affected by something that is so deeply in one's culture that one does not notice it is part of the way we think, the way we move in the world. For me to get to a point where I could actually recognize who I am, I had to do a lot of co-counseling, which is a kind of peer-based therapy. I've studied just about every religion in the world. I've paid attention to nature. Spent quite a lot of time with the Findhorn Foundation, which is why the forest poem interested me. And I know that it gets tiring being told, I don't exist. Our connected, intuitive response to nature is just our imagination. When nature genuinely does talk, when the earth speaks, the wind sings, the air whispers, the fire crackles and clears, and that we are all imbued with nature. We are integral to it, not separate from it. And because we are aware of that, we are also aware of our connections through our DNA to all our ancestors, and through the air that we breathe to every other being on the planet. And therefore it's important that we acknowledge that in the land of the seers, it was the seers that were murdered if they could get a hold of them. And if they weren't, they just murdered anybody that they thought was a bit too mouthy. Yo ho, I'm finished.
Wow. I'm kind of lost for words now.
We all will be.
Bless you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
What I'm suggesting is, rather than move on to try some technical horrendousness again,
Oh, poor you.
that we all switch on our videos and our microphones and talk to each other. And I think that would be rather nice for the last half hour. Can I ask that if you've got something to say, you put your hand up and we'll try and do it that way? Because otherwise it might turn into one of our regular fortnightly meetings where we all start talking over each other. So is there anybody who wants to start off? I'd like to say thank you to Lillian. That was really moving. Yeah.
As I said, Lillian, that was just, yeah, it was really moving, quite profound.
I think the level at which collective trauma in Europe is part of what we're still transforming is really an important layer of the work that we're all doing.
Who would like to go for it? Claire, are you putting your hand up?
No. Now that we've got electricity again, I was just trying to fix my lighting. But
Yay!
thank you so much, Lillian. That was really something else. It it's perhaps almost better that we've had these problems, because I think seeing that live was better than anything that we could have seen if it had been recorded. So maybe it's worked out for the best, Julie, because that was very powerful.
Katie, would you like to speak? Put your hand up.
Yeah, as someone who's completely new to this, I kind of saw the conference publicised on Facebook and stuff. I'm just wondering, how can I get involved? How can I help? What's the best way to approach that?
Go for it, Sheila.
Well, we're always looking for people to join us, because although we have been concentrating through the pandemic on all this constitutional stuff and that, we are about to start really concentrating, as I said earlier on all the other bits, the fundraising, the research, the putting people together. So if you have any skills or just want to come along and learn and help, we're more than happy to have you. I mean, Sarah's got your email address. I will send you, and I always put it on Facebook and try and remember and put it on Twitter as well, when we have our regular Zoom meetings for anybody to join us who wants to get involved. But I can certainly directly send them to you. And I don't know, there is getting sent out a potted history of the group, isn't there, Sarah?
Yes, after the meeting.
So that'll give you an idea of what we've been doing. But yeah, I mean, it's a long-term project, and all the help we can get would be wonderful. And it's wide. Zoom has been good because we can go all over Scotland, whereas we kind of born in Fife. So if we can get people from all over all over Scotland on Zoom, that's even better. So yeah, Sarah will give us your email, and we'll email you the link for the next meeting, and then we will volunteer you for everything.
Thank you.
She thinks I'm joking.
Oh no, I know you're not. That's the thing.
We have been talking about having subgroups, and we have been meeting once a fortnight, which is quite onerous for quite a lot of people. So we're going to move that to once a month, but also have subgroups working on different areas, because there's so much to do. So let us know what you want to do, and we'll get on to it. Who's next? Who's speaking? Annie Marshall?
Hi, everyone. I am not, well, I have Scottish blood. I have Scottish ancestry, but I am from the United States. Currently, I am stationed in Germany with the United States Army, so I'm very close by. I'm coming to the end of my my enlistment time. I have 3 more years, and a very dear and close personal friend of mine who lives in Doon has been gifted a couple of crofts on the Isle of RAWS, and she's generously gifted one of them to me. So I will, I am trying to work all the logistics of being able to move over so that I am able to be there full time. I am at your disposal of whatever I can do from my end, which, for the political side, I don't have a leg to stand on, but I do have a voice, and this is something very near and dear to my heart. So whatever you all need, just let me know.
Thank you very much. And as I said to Katie, we can email you and get you involved in whatever way you feel you can contribute. The more the merrier.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody else want to say anything? I'd like to apologise to Heather, who I can see here, Heather Miller. I'm really sorry we had technological problems. Your beautiful photos will be winning their way to everybody else fairly soon. Okay. And I see Julian is here. Hello, Julian. You have been name checked so many times today.
Right, yes, I'm sorry I came late because I tried to join on Friday, but if hopefully the event was on that Friday, I found out about it on Friday, in fact. But Ewan McAndrew kindly sent me the link, so I've been able to come. So it's, yeah,
Yes, and I must apologise to everybody. We had problems with Zoom because we oversubscribed the number of people who could come to one meeting. That was the main problem. So that's why some people only got links this morning. Anybody want to say anything?
Julian, throughout this so far today, there's been a lot of name checking of yourself, but also the survey of Scottish witchcraft, and a lot of people that have been doing, like Irene, Halliburton, have been doing research in their local area and have things that might be useful to be added to the information that you've already collated. Is that possible? And do we just work with you and Emma on that, or?
Essentially, the survey is not being updated at the moment. The map can be updated, and if there's someone who is been put in the wrong
Sorry,
place,
Julian, you seem to be breaking up and I can't hear you.
You and I corresponded about this a while ago. Connection. The survey is in two parts. There's the underlying database.
You're breaking. I'm sorry, Julian. We're really struggling to hear you.
And there is the interactive map, and the map was done, but can be updated.
I can't hear him. Can anybody else hear him?
No.
No.
Sorry.
And he's now disappeared.
Maybe he's trying to get a better connection. So that is the problem with Zoom. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, all I got was that the map can be updated, but the database isn't currently being done. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
I couldn't hear it.
I think that's what you said.
Okay.
So, is Claire still here? Oh, Morag, you wanted to ask a question? Yes. You're on mute, though. Unmute yourself.
Right, okay, sorry about that. I just wanted to ask if there's been such a lot of interesting information and different websites and different sort of, like, you know, ways of getting in touch with different folks. Is there somewhere that we can access all of that? Or are you able to collate information for us?
Yeah, we have started. We've actually, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Liz and Sheila for collating a lot of the information. I have got the biographies, or you should have got those with your tickets, but we have created a list of links and books for reference, etc. So they will be winging their way to you along with it. So expect a really big email.
Excellent. Thank you, that's fantastic, because I've madly been trying to write everything down as I went along, so that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I just found this an amazing conference, and thank you so much.
Sarah, I've got a YouTube link to the talk I gave this morning.
Brilliant.
So I can pass that on if you want to share it as well.
Yes, if there's anything that people have that's brand new or that they haven't shared already with us, then please send us links and we can include those. It's not gone out yet.
And that is one of the things that as a committee that we've talked about, is that there's so much stuff going on out there that, you know, we feel as if it would be really good if we became a conduit for helping people to find other things as well, and for, you know, share stuff on the Facebook page and stuff like that, and you know, everybody can reshare it and get the word out there, because there's a lot of some amazing things going on, as you saw with the Sandpaper project and with Karen Strang's film that we will eventually get to see if we're ever allowed out again, ever. So, you know, so there is a lot of stuff out there that we're discovering all the time as well. So we're always really interested in what's going on, what's out there, and sharing it with everybody.
And also, we're hoping to get a website Rowan, I'm really sorry your film hasn't been shown as well, because all of that work. But I know that Rowan is as keen as I am to get a website, so there's one
need a website.
One site that you can go to find everything.
So if anybody would like to volunteer because they've got wicked computer skills and build us their website and all that, that would be really, really appreciated.
Sorry, Laura's got a hand up.
Hi, I really wanted to ask Claire a question about the idea of pursuing legally what could be done. The Witchcraft Act was repealed, obviously, and previous legislation that was in place at the time. I mean, it goes so far back. What is the usual situation with when acts are repealed? Is there any possibility of raising action for compensation? I know you spoke initially about the fact there needs to be a direct link to somebody who was. I mean, if it's possible to actually identify a person, if there's a direct link ancestrally, the way that they did with the Mabo case in Australia, for example, to do with the territorial rights in Queensland, is there any way that, I mean, it's money talks, there's no question about that. And when you bring those kind of actions, that's when people sit up and listen. Is there anything around that kind of area of law that's possible?
I think that you've already identified the difficulty that you would have in that regard, which is identifying the people who were directly related to that person and then quantifying in the modern day what their loss would be. So it's certainly not my area of law, unfortunately. I'm in miscarriage of justice and criminal law, and compensation is not something that's common to that area of law and what I deal with. I think, I mean, I would absolutely love to see it. I think it's a fantastic idea if there were people out there that could be compensated for it. But I think the difficulty would be that the period in time is just too remote, and also the proof of who was your relative would be difficult to do. So I think those two factors mean it would be unlikely. A great shame, no doubt, and I would love to see it happen, but I'm not sure legally that would be possible. It's really for the same reason that you can't try and go to the court and individually ask for people's convictions to be overturned as a miscarriage of justice, because you cannot find a person with what would be described as a legitimate interest in the appeal itself if they weren't the person themselves, who's of course deceased, or the family of that person. But the court would be, I think, unlikely to entertain, well, they certainly are not going to entertain any applications to bring appeals, and I think it would be likely it would be the same. But if anyone knows any civil lawyers that know about compensation, please do ask them.
I have an aside. I am pitching books for next year, to write next year. I write fiction, and I'm pitching a book at the moment which is set in Glasgow in the 1840s, and one of the characters in this book will be the great-granddaughter of one of the last witches.
Wow.
She carries this kind of family trauma with her, which has dogged the family through this generations, because of course the families of witches were very much persecuted really as well, and many of them had to leave the area in which they lived and so forth. So it's not possible in law, but I hope I can trail some of those themes in the imagination, and I'll be writing that book next year for publication 2022, so I'll keep you posted.
This is something that I'm really interested in, is the portrayal of the witch in fiction and how it has changed over time. And I think that is going, you know, there are Harry Potter and The Worst Witch and all that kind of thing. But I think it's time for some really good local and realistic portrayals for kids. I was talking to Katie Brown about this. I don't know if she's still here. She was in before, but she's looking for something for a 12-year-old that will explain the realities, and I'm struggling to find something to give to her.
Well, by 2022, hopefully I'll be on it for, I don't know if it'll be suitable for 12-year-olds. It's usually more adult fiction, but if she had a slightly higher reading age, and it'll be very heavy on the history, but it will be set in the 1845, I think, around then. in Glasgow. But I think there is a real thing there. You know, one of the things that I really learned from writing Where Are the Women is that history is not a series of days. History is a series of hands being held through the generations. And those women held the hands of their daughters, who held the hands of their daughters, and passed on so much to them without even knowing, we get from our grandparents, our parents, our great-grandparents. And so history isn't a series of dates. It's a matter of the generations interacting with each other, really. And that's the basis of, that would be the basis of the novel, though they'll sell it as, like, I don't know, Dan Brown in Glasgow in 1850s, because that will sell a lot more copies, but you know what I'm really going to be doing.
What's interesting is there are actually quite a few people that are writing stories. The one that springs to mind, obviously, is Laura Bates's The Burning, the founder of the Everyday Sexism Project. I mean, she took a witch from St. Monans and a teenage girl, because they were about the same age, and meshed their two stories together. And the scary thing is that the difficulties and the persecution they had about their sexuality was very similar. And that's a book for young people, for, well, younger teenagers, not little people, teenagers, but there are a few, and there seems to be quite a couple of other ones whose name I completely forget at the moment, who are writing books on a similar vein. So it's definitely something that's catching people's imagination, the parallels between now and then, especially with social media.
It's a legacy that's definitely still with us. There's no,
oh God, yes,
we are all witches.
Can't see it. Oh, here's Morag. You're mute again, Morag. You'll have to switch on.
I didn't want to keep my mic on because my cats are meowing quite a lot in the background. Okay, it was just that I wondered if any of you'd come across. I live in the borders, in the Scottish borders, and there's quite a bit of information being put into a book by Mary Craig, about the witches in the borders, and I just wondered if any of you had come across that.
Yes, and I posted it on the National Library of Scotland do some wonderful lectures online at the moment, and I've actually shared it on our Facebook page. But a couple of days ago she did a presentation of her book, and she's a wonderful speaker, and I hoped we can nobble her for her and get her to come to our next one, because she was a fascinating speaker. It is on YouTube, but I have posted it on our page, and I have posted it on our Twitter feed as well, because the Borders Witch Hunt book, the lecture she gave, was excellent.
That's fantastic. Yes, I thought so too. Yeah. Now we've got a feline invader as well. Okay,
brilliant. Thank you. So, just talking of real life instead of virtual life, we were supposed to be having this conference in the Carnegie Hall in May. Obviously, we postponed it and put it forward to November, thinking that was going to be all over and done with by November. Here we are today, and we have another conference booked in the Carnegie Hall for the 2nd of May, but I am increasingly getting doubtful as to whether we will be able to actually do that one as well. So what I might suggest is that we have another virtual conference, maybe sometime in May. What do other people think? And we'll get somebody technical to push the buttons. Hello?
Hello?
Anybody there? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes, sounds good.
Yeah, I'm sorry, inside my head I'm going, panic, I have to write another speech. Ah! That's fine, if you're prepared to do the work, we'll go with you, love.
Yeah, but other people will have to nobble people like Mary, who they've heard talk as well. And any suggestions for people that you want to hear or you think would be good speakers, that would be excellent. Let me know. You've got my email via Eventbrite. I've got all of your emails, so I will send out emails to say when it's happening, if it's happening. And of course, look out for posters. I'll be using the Sophie Mackay Night. Sophie was going to be here today.
Oh, with a wonderful picture she's allowed us to use
I'll be using this image, so look out for this image because I've got posters printed. I just need to change the date on the posters when we eventually get a physical one. So yeah, just keep an eye out, and we will have a proper conference, and hopefully by then we'll all be able to hug each other and have chats in corridors and things like that. That would be really, really good. So that's what we're missing here. Is there anybody got anything else to say, or shall I attempt to show another video, or shall we just call it a halt just now?
Juliana's got something to say, and so does Donna.
Hello, ladies. I just want to say, as someone that's quite new to the group, as you know, the girls know, I just want to say a huge thanks to everybody who's organised it. It's actually been, I think it's been quite emotional. It's certainly been very powerful, and I think it's fantastic to see everybody pulling their resources together to try and get to the same aim. So just thank you very much from me.
Thanks, Juliana, because you've just joined the group, but you've taken on Facebook, and you're doing a grand job. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, get roped in for admin.
Well, tell people we get.
Yeah, we're not precious about this at all. If you can give anyone a job, we will do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
if you see it, you do it.
Yes, as Donald well knows.
Right. We have some questions in chat if somebody wants to.
Oh yeah,
answer.
go on. Go on, you ask questions.
I've been jotting them down as we go. Me being a dinosaur and still using pen and paper.
The quickest way.
One of the first questions from Caroline was, where are you hoping to site the monument?
Oh.
Fife would be the short answer.
Good question. It's been much discussed.
Yeah, I mean, it has. But I think that we have an excellent... If anybody can come up with a better idea, then, you know, we're always open to it. But the feeling in the committee, I think, would be fair to say that Fife, not just because we kind of started this off in Fife, but because we have Lillis Adey, so we have the only grave of an accused person. But Fife also has some of the more notorious stories of witches. I mean, we've got Janet Confruit, who was lynched in Pittenweem. We've got the Great Witch of Balgony and things like that. So there's a lot about the witches in Fife. So we feel that it would be good to be in Fife, and a lot of the group also believe that it would be really good to have it in the west of Fife because of there potentially some areas there that could be used. But Mino on our committee usually explains this beautifully because but if he's here, he can come on and do the spiel.
He might have gone.
He might have gone. Oh
no,
there he is.
No, I'm
but
here.
Mino's really good at explaining this.
Well, it was really because I feel that a national monument is clearly needed for all the reasons we've talked about today. We see in society today what happens when any particular portion of society gets stigmatized, and that there are lessons going forward, which is one of the themes that I'm very pleased to say came out from today. And in terms of a location, I was very conscious Fife didn't have a very good record in terms of the intensity of the persecutions in Fife were, you know, amongst the highest, and also the fact that the proximity of Lillis Adey, because for whatever reason, as you know, a lot of the executions were by strangulation and then fire, so there's no burial place. And so there are a few witch burials in Scotland, and they're normally revenant graves. So that big slab of sandstone that you saw in the picture in one of the videos was basically to prevent her soul from rising from where she was interred just above the low water line. But the difference about Lillis Adey is the very fact that the interest in phrenology, which was the studying of bumps on the skull, to be able to deduce aspects of personal characteristics, meant that her skull was actually retrieved from this casket in the late 19th century. And as a result of this interest in phrenology, lots of very detailed measurements were made of her skull. And as a result of that, someone has then ported that into a graphics program to actually create a life-like image of what Lilias AD may well have looked like. And so of all these poor tortured souls, she's the only one that we have that can actually physically talk to us across the centuries. And that's a very powerful thing for me, certainly. And so that from that grew the thought that if there was to be a national monument, then it couldn't be more fitting if it wasn't somewhere within that kind of vicinity where people could also go and pay their respects at that particular place, which is actually in Torrey Bay. And that's really was the sort of the seed. But then the other things that sort of build into a sort of a West Fife context is the proximity of Curis, which is one of our few sort of architectural gems, in that it shows something of even the sort of the context, and Curis itself was a center of quite a lot of the persecution. And so with Curis, we now have the Pilgrims Way that actually stretches from Kincardine all the way to St. Andrews, and also the Five Coastal Path. There are lots of reasons why you could actually put together a very important sort of almost like a magnet to draw people in and show them so many different facets of the same story. And it sort of brings a national monument to somewhere that's not just Edinburgh, which already has hundreds and thousands of national monuments, many more to animals than ladies, as we've heard today. So that was really the sort of the thought. And there are a couple of sites which I can't say more about at the moment, because until the landowners are happy to give consent, it's not appropriate. But just to sort of give that reassurance to everyone that it's something that it is being pursued in that kind of general area. And as soon, and I hope for the national conference next year, I hope we'd be in a position to say that we have that kind of landowner consent. Because the next thing to consider is that, what is this monument? I mean, this is one of the questions. All we know is it's going to be large, as Sheila said. I had this very conversation this morning. I was laying a wreath in Kincardine, and I met someone and they were asking me the question. I said, well, just look at this monument that we're standing here, this war memorial, and just look at the number of names on it. And said, now consider a monument where you'd want to put 4,000 names on it, and think, now that's not just a little plaque on a wall or a small village war memorial. That's something that's actually quite big, and it has to be commanding. It has to have some presence because of the nature of what the message is trying to give you, the enormity, and the thing is, people don't understand numbers very well. It's 1, 10, 100, and many. 4,000 people is difficult to figure, and so. My own personal view, and we've had this conversation, at some point we will need to have a competition to actually design this. And it really needs to be a worldwide competition, because where that gem, that spark comes, and while I'd love to think it's an artist or an architectural person in Fife, it could come from anywhere. That that we run a competition that says, in this context, so you know what the place looks like, and with these objectives, come up with something that's really going to be a huge wow, another Kelpie, something that people will want to come for other reasons, but then also get attracted by the story that they find when they get there. So that's my little tuppence worth. I hope that's served to sort of paint a picture that you can all buy into. Thank you.
Thank you, Minnow.
I was just wondering, is it possible to maybe think about a more like interconnected idea of a monument? Of, I was saying, like like having your site in Fife and maybe having other related and interconnected smaller monuments round.
Yes, if you know anything about our witches trail, that's kind of started
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So that the individual thingy and the idea, well, the idea that Liz, one of the other committee members, and I have talked about, and Liz has briefly mentioned it to Emma, is linking, because there are actually memorials out there. It's just that a lot of people don't know about them, and linking them all so that there's a point of reference for them all. But also, as Mino said, the Pilgrims Trail and the Fife Coastal Walk go from one end of Fife up to, from Kinross. No, not Kinross.
Kincardine. Kincardine even.
Kincardine even, up to St Andrews.
Excuse me, to Newborough. To Newborough.
Oh, sorry, does it go all the way to Newborough? I didn't know that. Yeah, now you've made me forget what I was going to say.
No, yeah, it's just, so it's not a completely isolated thing, like, so it is really interconnected, because obviously each part is personal and the history is individual. Like, some parts were really badly affected by it, some not so much, some had really interesting stories, some had names. So yeah, that might be.
That's the idea. That's the kind of where I was trying to get to.
Yeah, it was
each of the desks are linked to the idea is that the accused witches trail that's been put in place, the desks linked to a website with the story of the person, and then all these desks hopefully will all interconnect, and it'll all bring you into the national monument. So you'll be able to see the national monument, and then you'll be able to go and find a specific witches memorial as well.
Absolutely.
We don't think small in this group, we think big. I mean,
I think it's definitely about remembering, and Julian had mentioned there as well, like, not more about remembering, not maybe so much a competition, I think he said. But yeah, no, I think that's definitely a good idea.
Yeah, no, we're sort of mulling over these ideas, and like I said, we started in a wee small way with the 3 discs, telling Lily Sadie's story, and then hopefully we're going to help people build on that. And it's the same person who did the discs that did the Pilgrims Way as well. So I mean, we're all trying to keep it local, trying to keep it interesting, and see where it goes.
We're starting to run out of time now. Has anybody got any burning issues that they want to?
Can I say something, please? I wanted to just talk to everybody about something. I've been involved in it for a long time, and I do actively work, like Lillian, with spirituality and land-based energy and various things. Some years ago, I came to Scotland in an attempt to find wells that were holy wells. And I really, at that point, 10 years ago, I couldn't find any because they'd all been shut down. They'd been shut down deliberately over many, many years. And these are the kind of places that these people worked with, and healers worked with, and anybody interested in alternative ways of looking at connecting with nature and religion and all the rest of it worked with. And I find that as a really, really important point in Scotland. These are still difficult places to see. I was on Orkney trying to find them at that point. But I think it's something that people could actively now go out and reopen. In Ireland, they started, we never had the same problem in Ireland as they had in Scotland. The witch trials were never so serious there. There were very, very few people. But the water areas and the wells and the holy wells were kept open, and people protected them. In Scotland, there was a real, I feel over many centuries, it was a real oppression by the Kirk, by the authorities, by the religious authorities. And that's something that I really do think could be, if it's not actively reactivated, people should be aware of the fact that we can't see very much in our geography any longer. I just wanted to bring that up as an active thing.
Brilliant. So that's something else that we should take into account. The next meeting of the committee is on Thursday.
The 12th at 7 o'clock. It'll be on Facebook, Twitter, and you'll get the link with all the bump that Sarah's going to send out later.
Yeah. hopefully you'll all get it by Thursday, but please bear in mind we're running this again next Sunday. So if you don't get an email this week, don't worry, you'll get it next week. It'll all come out together. So just want to say thank you very much for coming to this today and for contributing such a lot, and my massive apologies. I would like to say a really big thank you to Andrea, who isn't usually involved in this but has been strong-armed by me into running the Zoom, and it's not her fault, none of my stuff's worked. But next week I'll have all the videos working because she'll have them. So that's pressure for her. Okay, I am going to say thank you very much and goodbye, and hope to hear from you all again soon.
Next week it will be my fault.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good to see
Bye.
you all.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Sheila. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We appreciate it. Thanks, Laura. Bye.